NBS happening now.
All right, thank you very much. Round of applause to the cultural troupe. And of course, I will request that we get seated. And I want to say once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. And may God bless you for the time that you have spared to be with us. I know someone else is asking, why haven't we prayed? I don't want to take the Ugandan anthem to be a prayer, but do I have a volunteer to give us a word of prayer? Things of prayer, some people keep running away from. Please, yes, please come and give us a word of prayer. And we'll ask that we humble ourselves for that word of prayer before we get to officially kick off our ceremony this afternoon.
Let's pray. Almighty, ever-living God, fountain of all, we honor you for this evening and afternoon that you have given unto us. Here we come to commemorate and celebrate the mighty and strong man, Omukama Kabalega. Fountain of all, we come here as people who give reverence to whatsoever he gave in his possibilities. Father, we pray that whatsoever is going to happen in this place may be as per your guidance. We rebuke all the plans of the evil, and we pray that each and everything may be a success. May it be a time to learn, may it be a time to understand more, and above all, may it be a time to glorify your name.
That I am talking to people who are here to celebrate the life of a man who was not only mighty and strong in terms of stature or in terms of strength of putting together a kingdom that crisscrosses different nations, but also a man who inspired a number of kingdoms. I know some may not take it very lightly down themselves, but I know that many of the kingdoms that we are talking about in Uganda today or in a greater part of Africa have a contribution that is coming in from the great Omukama Kabalega. And I want to say a special thank you to the Kabalega Foundation, together with the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, for ensuring that we do not get to forget persons who shaped legacies, persons who shaped the way traditions and culture and governance is set out and is taken on in this day and age. Earlier on, as we did get to speak, we were talking about how the westernization, or these, I don't know how to even call it, because for me, when we talk about civilization, civilization started from Africa. If you talk about some of the most ancient things that we think have come from the West, I'm sorry about those who think I am outrightly hitting at them, something like cesarean section, I am very sure it did come from Bunyoro. Am I right or wrong? Did someone say wrong? Then probably you do not know your culture, you do not know your history pretty well. If we talk about Kenya, Kenya has a bit of Bunyoro in it. If you talk about Tanzania, they have Bunyoro in their blood. When you talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have Bunyoro in their blood. Talk about a bit of Rwanda, they have Bunyoro in their blood. So I want us to give a huge round of applause for Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, the great empire that existed and still exists in our hearts. But the challenge to us is, how have you upheld your culture? How have you upheld your cultural institution? I want to ask the Banyoro who are right here, in as much as you continue to live, how much do you contribute to the growth of your kingdom and your culture? It's just a word for us to pay attention to. I know that in our midst, we have the Prime Minister of Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, and I'll be introducing him to you, who will be joining us right here in just a bit. And I know that Kabalega Foundation will be giving us the honors to let us know who else is in our midst. I can see a number of distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I do not want to pinpoint at one lest I forget the other, and I'll be hung and sued for that exactly. But I want to say a special welcome to you all as we get to take a look at a very interesting conversation, the role of culture in promotion of development. And I will say not just development, but sustainable development. When we talk about, we just finished the conference of party in Dubai, that is the COP28, talking about climate change and the environment. Culture is at the heart of climate change issues and at the heart of the environment. We'll be getting to know how and why we need to put culture at the forefront. When we talk about gender equality, yeah, I know some people will be talking about some cultural norms that said the women don't have to do this, women don't eat this, but there was still a positive aspect of culture in promoting gender equality and the role of the woman. When we talk about inheritance, I know there's a conversations that we are going to be having at a later stage. When we talk about culture and governance, the institutions that we have of government and everything, they draw a lot of inspiration from the way our cultural institutions were set up in the past. And that is why they are able to exist and coexist. For example, in Uganda's case, we have the cultural institutions, but we also have the government, the central government, as we would refer to it as. So culture plays a very important aspect. So for us who are looking at only the negative aspect, the negativity that comes out of it, and I always love to say there is not negativity from culture. It is only that there are persons who want to take advantage of making it a negative aspect, because I believe, even when we talk about patriarchy in our cultural institutions and all the negative aspects and the consequences that come from the negative patriarchy, it's because people have not thought about the positive that comes out of it. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me, without any further ado, to invite a representative from the Kabalega Foundation and to come and welcome us before we get to hear from our distinguished keynote speaker, who I can't wait to listen from. And at a later stage, I will request that the Kabalega Foundation invites the Prime Minister of Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom to come and give company to our keynote address. I mean our keynote speaker, because he feels lonely at that table right there. You know, they always say it is lonely at the top, right? But please, I hope, Prof, you're not feeling lonely already, because you have a lot of audience that is here. So let's welcome the Kabalega Foundation to come and give us the honors of welcoming us here as we continue with our conversation. Solomon, you're welcome. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Mildred. I'm Solomon Karuhanga, the Programs Coordinator, Kabalega Foundation. I'm so happy, I'm so glad that I'm seeing Kabalega in all of you. I'm so glad by the fact that you have moved from wherever you have come from to be here to commemorate the 100 years of Kabalega, to celebrate a hero, to celebrate bravery. I feel very, very happy. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome you. Feel at home. We are celebrating a hero. We are celebrating a grandfather of our independence. So whatever we are going to discuss under a theme of the role of culture in promotion of development, the case of Africa, is going to be key, not only for Bunyoro, but for Uganda, for East Africa, for Africa and the entire world. In a special note, I want to welcome the chief guest, Professor Lumumba. He's a renowned speaker, an activist of African independence, and the person is going to talk about today, Kabalega the Great, is a hero and a grandfather of independence. Of recent, I was talking to a professor from Ghana. He was stressing that Ghana, as a country, as the first country to attain independence in Africa, greatly was looked at Kabalega, the heroics of Kabalega, and they were inspired. That's why they stood against imperialism. Today, we are against imperialism, we are against neocolonialism, and that's why we are here today, to celebrate a hero, to celebrate 100 years of Kabalega. And that's why we have the Kabalega Memorial Lecture. I want to welcome you all, feel at home, and Professor, welcome to Uganda. And we are all eager, all these people here are here to listen from you. At this moment, I would like to welcome, by the way, amidst us, we have representatives from all cultural institutions in Uganda. We have Owekitiibwa Dr. Anthony Wamala, representing the Prime Minister of Uganda. Welcome, sir. As Mildred said, we have a delegation from Toro Kingdom, led by the Deputy Prime Minister, Finance. We shall be also noting down and letting you know the other representatives from other cultural institutions. At this moment, I want to welcome the Prime Minister of Bunyoro, Ateny Byakutaga. And Ateny, please come and sit with Professor in front. Thank you so much. We shall be having a speech as Kabalega Foundation, but this is a welcoming remark. Thank you so much. Mildred, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Solomon, and thank you so much to the Kabalega Foundation. We will definitely be getting to hear from them at a later stage. And to all our distinguished guests in your capacities, we want to say a special thank you, especially to the representatives of the cultural institutions. This represents the Ubuntu, this represents the oneness that we have always talked about for a long time. Also in our midst is the Secretary General of the Uganda Kings and Cultural Leaders Forum, the Right Honorable Ambassador Georgia Tim. Please, wherever you are, thank you so much for coming through. We do have Dr. John Kinto Livingstone from the Linguistics and Cultural Studies, Makerere University. Thank you so much for making time. I know we have so many members from the academia. Right next to him I see Mr. Mwambusi Andebesa, a historian, who fervently speaks against imperialism in each and every form. We do have the former Minister for Presidency and also a princess from Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. I know you know who I'm talking about, Princess Raboni Masko. Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this, Princess Kabakumba Masko. I do have, I did cite the former president of the Uganda Law Society, and that is Honorable Mr. Simon Peter Chinobe Council. All the titles go with him. Thank you so much, and is a son of the soil as well. We want to say a special thank you to you. I will be letting you in on who else is in our midst. And ladies and gentlemen, I know that we've waited for this day for a very long time. My name is Mildred Tuhaise Amoti Ndimuwijwa Nyakawijwa. I come from the Hippo clan from Bunyoro. Twina abawijwa na abawijwa kati abandi banyakawijwa na abawijwa. Oh, I actually have a brother in the midst. Welcome and thank you so much for coming through. And I want to welcome each and every one of you from Bunyoro, from Toro, from our grandchildren. We just received a daughter, especially our grandchildren from Busoga. Do we have any Basoga in the house? Oh yes, exactly. They're right here with us. We celebrate with the kingdom. And without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we have waited for the speech from our keynote speaker, Professor PLO Lumumba, as many know him. And I would like to not take any other more time because we can't wait to drink from your cup of knowledge. And sir, I take the honors to invite you. Let's give him a round of applause. Let us invite Professor PLO Lumumba. Exactly. We can't wait to drink from your cup of knowledge. And so the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Let me start by thanking the Bunyoro Kitara Foundation. Let me also appreciate the King in absentia, represented by the Prime Minister. Let me also recognize representatives from other kingdoms, from the Republic of Uganda, and all who are present here. The question and the place of culture is one that must preoccupy our minds, particularly on an occasion such as this, when we are gathered here to commemorate slightly by a few months 100 years since the passing of the Omukama Kabalega of the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. We are gathered here to remind ourselves of the place of culture in the lives of our societies. And when we do so because we are aware that the Bunyoro Kitara and the many kingdoms that we have in Uganda and indeed in the continent of Africa have been victimized by other civilizations. But we know that prior to the rude disruption of our governance systems, African kingdoms were organized. The Bunyoro Kitara kingdom was organized, and even the European historians and anthropologists who have tried to say no recognize that they were. The Buganda kingdom was organized, the Toro were organized, the Banyankole were organized, the Shilluk in what is present-day South Sudan were organized, the Yoruba were organized in what is present-day Nigeria, the Akan were organized, the Zulu were organized, we were organized. And our organization as an African people was informed by order and compassion. The history of Africa is therefore a history of welcoming other civilizations in the hope that they would reciprocate. But history teaches us that they did not. It is Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah who writes that when they came, the stage opened with their historians coming to us, with their anthropologists coming to us, with their missionaries coming to us and telling us, keep up your treasure in heaven where there is no rust and moths. But meanwhile, they were taking our gold. That is how they dealt with us. And it is not only the Europeans who started that journey of disruption and exploitation. The Arabs did it, and we don't talk about it as loudly as we should. They came. And they took us into slavery. And they castrated our men. So that when you don't see dark-skinned people in the numbers that we should in the Arab world, is because they castrated men. And we must never forget that. The Portuguese came. They were in West Africa. They were in the Congo. And we welcomed them as we normally do, and we still do. And no sooner had we welcomed them than they made the claim that they had discovered us. They discovered us, they claim. They discovered our mountains, which we had lived next to for ages. The French came. The Germans came. The Italians came. The Belgians came. The English came. All in their arrogance. And they made their way. And in what we now call Uganda, they came to the Bunyoro Kitara kingdom, and they were resisted by Kabalega. And a man called Baker came, and he was beaten by Kabalega. History teaches us. But then they went away, and they assembled in Berlin in 1884 and 1885, and they divided us into what we now have as Uganda, as Tanzania, as Kenya. We are now 54 and still counting. But what we must never forget is that at all time we resisted. Those who say we never resisted are mistaken. We did. They planted the seeds of division. I can still remember those famous words of Nigeria's Chinua Achebe in his book, Things Fall Apart, when he says that they came and planted the seed amongst brother and brother, sister and sister, and things fell apart, and they have remained apart. They came and they disrupted us. They told us that our God was not God. They came with a God, and today, when you go into many households of those who claim to be Christians or those who are Christians, you find the image of an actor called Geoffrey Hunter being received as the image of Jesus Christ. They came and told us that our names were not good names, and they gave us names. They came and told us that our natural features had to acquire different names. So they came and found Lake Muitanzige and say, no, it is Lake Albert. They came and found our lake with our name. They say, this is Edward. They said another one is George. The falls which we had lived with, they said, this is Murchison. And even our national park, they called it Elizabeth. And when they went down, they found Lake Narubari and said, this is Victoria. And when they went down, they said that the falls, Mosio Tunya, was Victoria Falls. They came and told us that our culture meant nothing. And we believed them. And unfortunately, we still believe them. So today, when we are gathered here to commemorate one of the great African stalwarts, Omukama Cwa II Kabalega, we must ask ourselves fundamental questions, uncomfortable questions. And those questions relate and rotate around the question of the thing that is called development. What is this thing called development? I remember not so long ago, the great Tanzanian founding father, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, being interviewed about development, and he said, from where we sit, development is not confined to the size of what the Europeans call the gross domestic product, GDP. That to us is not development, he said. Development cannot, in our estimation, be per capita income. That is not development. Development must not be restricted to the number of skyscrapers that we have. No, that is not development. Development cannot be understood to mean that we must go to the moon. That is not development. Development, from what we see and what we call development, is to have an environment where there is a spiritual, social, political, and economic contentment. So let the Americans go to the moon, but we want water in our households. And I still believe that in our understanding of development, we must recognize that development is about our ability to recognize humanity in ourselves. It is those civilizations that have claimed that they were developed that have visited great pain upon the world. The Europeans, tell me, throughout the ages, which other civilization has visited pain upon humanity like the European tribes? Whether those tribes are Germans, whether they are British, whether they are Italian, whether they are English, whether they are the Belgians, there is no civilization other than civilizations from Europe that have visited pain upon others like they have. When in 1914, the European tribes were fighting amongst themselves, they called it the World War. When they fight themselves, they call it World War. From where they sit, what they do is the world. When they fought again between 1939 and 1945, they did not call it tribal war, they call it world war. And we were inducted into those wars. They came to us and they told us that our cultures were not good, so that even today, as I speak to you, instead of addressing you in Kiswahili or Kinyoro or Luganda, they have captured our tongues that I'm now speaking to you in a foreign tongue. I look forward to the day when in an assembly such as this, I'll address you in the Kiswahili language. I look forward to that day. I look forward to the day when we shall have totally liberated ourselves, that we will be able to appreciate that indeed when we talk about development, we talk about the totality of culture. In Kiswahili they say, mwachamila ni mtumwa. He or she who abandons his or her culture is a slave. And there is a sense in which we remain enslaved. How do we remain enslaved? Just look at your names, including my very own. Look at it. Who is this individual that is called Patrick, for whom I am named? Who is he? Why is it that on the day that I was baptized, they could not allow me to use my local name? Why? Why is it that when we are referring to ourselves, we refer to ourselves as Anglophone, as Francophone, as Lusophone? And right now we are even always in the business of referring to ourselves as otherphone. Soon we will be Sinophones. This is what we are doing to ourselves on a daily basis in the name of development. When we run our governments and their university professors here, when they teach political science, oh, what science do they teach? They teach the ideas of somebody from the United States. They talk about Max Weber. They talk about Adam Smith. They talk about John Austin. They talk about H.A.L. Hart. They don't talk about Kabalega. They don't talk about Mutesa. They don't talk about Shaka the Amazulu. They don't talk about us because we are totally dominated, so that even the universities that we run, the law that we teach, the political science that we teach, the history that we teach, the geography that we teach is so Eurocentric that on this day when we remember Omukama Cwa II Kabalega, we must also exercise the spirit of slavery, mental slavery, that we may welcome a new spirit of freedom. Because if we don't, we will be dominated throughout the ages. You know, as I talk about development now, I think about this continent that has known slavery. The Omukama himself was taken away from the comfort of his kingdom and spirited to Seychelles. He stayed there for over 2 decades. When they had neutered the society, then they allowed him to come back. He did not get home. He died on his way. But this country for a long time did not even recognize him until later in the day. But we still recognize Prince Charles with a name in the middle of Kampala. I look forward to the day when such names shall no longer exist in the streets of Kampala. When I think about this continent, and I think about how we were colonized, and I think about how we regained our independence, and no sooner had we regained our independence than we adopted the very same things that we inherited from the white colonizers. So that if you go to the Ugandan parliament, the Kenyan parliament, the Ghanaian parliament, the Zimbabwean parliament, the Nigerian parliament. As the great African American John Henrik said, they are mimicry of what the colonizers left for us. And he says, and I agree, we will never succeed on the basis of that kind of organization. We were told, and we are still told, that in order to run a government, in order to run a judiciary, you must run it in the manner that the British taught us to do, complete with the manner in which they dressed. In order to run a parliament, we must run a parliament like they did, and our speaker must still wear some woolen white thing, which people stopped wearing many years ago, but we still wear. And even when we run our affairs, we must do it in the manner that they did. We are mimicking them. And when we think we have developed, indeed we are not. That is what colonization did to us. So today, when we are gathered here to remember Omukama Kabalega, we are asking ourselves, is there not something in our tradition that we could use to change the continent of Africa? And why is that argument legitimate and necessary? It is legitimate and necessary because when Ghana became the first country to regain her independence, the first sub-Saharan country to regain her independence, always be very careful, because the Sudanese will tell you that they regained their independence in 1956 and Ghana in 1957, but I always remind them that the real independence in Africa was with Ghana in 1957. And I can still remember those powerful words of Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah on 6th of March 1957, say that the independence of Ghana meant nothing if the rest of Africa was not free. But even as he spoke those words, Kwame Nkrumah was quite clear. He was clear that flag independence, the mere fact that we have the Ugandan flag, or the Kenyan flag, or the Ugandan national anthem, or the Kenyan national anthem, or the Ghanaian national anthem, or the Nigerian national anthem, was not sufficient, that there was something else. And he reminded us in 1965 that Africa was getting into the most dangerous stage, the stage where the former colonizers would become more deadly through the neo-colonial project. No sooner had he written his book than they overthrew him. No sooner had he written his book than they started destroying what we had inherited from them. So those of you who are students of history will remember the 1960s. You'll remember in 1961, the Congolese thought that they had regained independence under Patrice Emery Lumumba. They killed him after 9 months. The Togolese thought that they had regained independence under Sylvanus Olympio. They killed him in 1963. The Ghanaians thought that they had regained independence in 1957. They overthrew Nkrumah in 1966. They thought in Nigeria that they had regained independence with Nnamdi Azikiwe and Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. They overthrew him in 1967. The Malians thought that they had regained independence through Modibo Keita. They overthrew him in 1968. The Algerians thought they did so through Ahmed Belbela. They overthrew him in 1968. Africa, as I speak now, and I want you to cast your eyes across the continent of Africa and see the crisis of governance, and therefore begging the question, is there a place for African culture and governance? Tell me whether there is peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tell me whether there is peace in Sudan. Tell me whether there is peace in northern Mali. Tell me whether there is peace in Somalia. Tell me whether there is peace in Cameroon. Tell me whether the Europeans are not telling us what to do. Tell me whether they do not send their agents across every country. Tell me whether the IMF and the World Bank are not trying to interfere in our affairs. Tell me whether they are not telling us who a man is and who a woman is. Tell me whether they are not telling us what to wear. Tell me, what are they not telling us? They are telling us that if we don't have culture, they'll give us their culture. Tell me. This is the state in which we find ourselves. And therefore, today, when we are assembled here to remember Omukama Kabalega, and we ask ourselves whether there is a place for culture in development, we owe ourselves a duty to define what culture is. You know, European anthropologists, they are the notorious ones. They tell us that when you talk about African culture, they have no culture. They could not write. Not true. When the Europeans were living in caves, we already had the Benin Empire, longer than the Chinese was. We already had the Monomotapa Empire. We already had the walls of Timbuktu. Before the Europeans knew whether it is the earth that went round the sun, the Dogon already knew astronomy as it is known today. They knew. When they could not write, the Africans had already identified the value of zero in mathematics. When they did not know about cesarean section, operations of that nature already taking place in the continent of Africa. When they were dying in snow and in ice, in Ethiopia, in Axum, they were already building the underground edifices in Lalibela. They were building pyramids in Sudan and in Egypt. There were already libraries in Carthage. Pythagoras and all these people were already learning their philosophy from Orunmila among the Yoruba. We were there. We had a culture that was complete with science, complete with mathematics, complete with the arts. And when they say we have no art, they forget that they have stolen all of them and they are to be found in the museums in Europe. If we had no culture and if we could not do the things they say we could not do, why were they plundering the things that they plundered? Why? Because we had a culture, and what you do is that you destroy a people's culture and then you create another culture and make them think like you want them to think. This is what they did, not only to us who remained in the mother continent, they did it even to our brothers and sisters who are taken to the Caribbean, those who are taken to the Northern America, those who went to Southern America. They did it and they took away our language. And if you doubt me, I want you to watch Alex Haley's Roots and see how the main character, Kunta Kinte, was beaten that he may abandon his name and acquire a new culture. But those who have a culture and those who believe in it will never abandon it. That is why we are remembering Omukama Kabalega, because he stood tall. Those of you who do not know will remember that incident in a hostel where the Omukama's arm had been amputated and he kicked one of them. The time to kick them is now. The time to kick them is now, because when we kick them, then they'll realize that our culture was not dead. Our culture was merely in comatose. And we are beginning to rise. And we are beginning to redefine what development is. The great Ghanaian Nana Kobina Nketiah V has written a book which I commend to all of us, The Place of Culture in Governance, the Ghanaian example. And he tells us that he has, over the years, looked at governance in Africa, just like we have. And the governance structure that we inherited have not served us well. If you look at Uganda, since she earned her political independence, the history of Uganda is replete with painful moments. The history of Sudan, painful moments. Somalia, painful moments. Ghana, painful moments. Congo, painful moments. Rwanda, painful moments. Burundi, painful moments. Nigeria, painful moments. Algeria, painful moments. Liberia, painful moments. South Africa, painful moments. Zimbabwe, painful moments. It has been a history of pain because our culture was taken away. And when we thought that we had a solution to our problems, a new wound appeared. How many of you remembering in 1980s when they came here and told us the solution to the African problem is multi-party politics? And we believed. We formed parties. In the Democratic Republic of Congo at one time, there were 233 of them. We formed them. We started holding elections. Then we discovered that in Africa, we can hold elections. You can have the highest number of votes, but he who is announced the winner is the winner, the number of votes notwithstanding. We discovered that. Then we are asking ourselves, what can we do? If this foreign culture has failed to solve our problems, we thought that when we regained independence using other people's culture, our education would help us. Today, we have many graduates from our many universities, but yet we can't solve our medical problems. In Uganda, it is only those who cannot afford medical attention in Europe or India or Dubai or South Africa who go to Murago. In Kenya, it is the same. In most Africa, it's the same. So even the promises we made to ourselves about development in medicine, we have not realized them. Then we said we would have education, and we have universities, and we teach engineering in those universities. But when we want to build roads, we want to build the expressway from Kampala to Entebbe, it is not the Ugandans who do it, it's the Chinese who do it. When we want to build expressway in Nairobi, it's the Chinese who do it. When we want to build anything in Africa, it's the Chinese who do it. What happened to our engineering? When we want to do anything, we still depend on them, and our problems still continue. We still send our young men and women to the Arab world to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to all those other countries. And those who don't send take themselves there by crossing the Mediterranean Sea. What happened to us? Do we still have the spirit of Omukama Kabalega? Or we are weak and conquered and captured? This is the question that we must ask this morning or this afternoon. What is the place of culture? There are those who say that Africa is too diverse. There are too many cultures. Which one will we adopt? Is it that of the Bunyoro Kitara? Is it that of the Baganda? Is it that of the Batoro? Is it that of the Basoga? Is it that of any of our many communities, or the Zulu, or the Xhosa, or the Pedi, or the Kakan, or the Yoruba, or the Temne, or the Mende? We ask. Who said that we cannot have a mixture of those cultures? Who said that we cannot borrow that which is good in Buganda culture? Who said that we cannot borrow that which is good in the Banyoro culture? Who said that we cannot borrow that which is good in the Toro culture or the Yoruba culture? Who said that when we combine them, we cannot come with a system that will then fit us? Who said? Who is telling us that? Today, as we remember Omukama Kabalega, we are reminding ourselves that we can do it. We can do it because history has demonstrated that it can be done. You know, they came and told us several years ago that there was something called Millennium Development Goals. There were 8 of them. Then they rained their course. Then they increased, they did not reduce. They became 17 now Sustainable Development Goals. And those goals said the things that we knew. We knew how to plant trees. We had an idea of what medicine is. We knew about education, and we still know. We knew about climate change. We knew how to deal with sustainable development and sustainable environment. We knew. But they tell us, you did not know. We must meet, and the Europeans started inviting us to meetings from 1975. The most recent was in Dubai, the 28th, and we go to such meetings. And when we come back, we marvel at what we said. Now that Uganda has discovered oil and every African country is discovering oil, they are telling, now we must leave oil alone. We must now embrace other things. The role of culture in development. I'm suggesting to us that the time is now that Africans must look for a solution to governance. I must commend the current administration. They came and found that cultural institutions had been burned, and they restored them. That restoration was the beginning of the realization that a people without a culture cannot go anywhere. But I would urge this administration and coming administration that cultural institutions must have enhanced roles in governance. Cultural institutions must be given stronger positions in governance, because it is only when you do so that you will begin to see them in their full splendor. You know, in many African societies. And I say this with all due respect to heads of states in different African countries. You can go to Nigeria, and the president of Nigeria makes a pronouncement saying all the Yoruba people must be inoculated against tuberculosis. And when you go back, you'll discover that the response is only 20%. But when the Oni of Yoruba says all Yorubas must be inoculated, the response is 90%. The same thing here in Uganda. There are certain things which if the traditional rulers say, the people will obey. Why do they obey? What is it? That thing is the thing that we must discover. And that thing, if we mix it with the kind of governance system that we have, is going to lead us in the right direction. I still do not have an answer, but I think that there is something in it. What is it that the Omukama Kabalega has, that the Kabaka of Buganda has, that the Oni of Ife has, that the king of the Mazulu has, that the king of the Swati has, that when they speak, people obey? What is it? Why did we lose it? Can we regain it? It is not to say that all traditional rulers were perfect. No, there are certain aspects of culture that we must jettison, but there are certain positive aspects of culture that we must embrace, because culture is dynamic. And I'm suggesting to all of you who are gathered here today that the time is now. The time is now for Africa to realize that there is a place of culture in modern day medicine. The time is now for Africa to realize that there is a place for culture in education. The time is now for Africa to realize that there is a place for culture in politics and governance. The time is now that Africa must realize that there is a place of culture in resource management. The time is now for Africa to realize that there is a place for culture in giving pride of place to our women in governance. The time is now for Africa to realize that there is a place of culture in ensuring that our family is retained. The time is now for Africa to recognize that if we do not protect ourselves, other cultures will come and dominate us. The time is now for Africa to realize that our languages must be protected, otherwise we'll be speaking Chinese and Indian as our mother tongue, although they were never our mothers. The time is now. The time is now, therefore, for us to wake up in the knowledge that we must instruct our institutions of higher learning to begin to investigate what it is that we are teaching. Several years ago, a great Nigerian who is a singer called Fela Nicola Pokuti sang, "Teacher, don't teach me nonsense." For too long now, many of our institutions have been teaching us things that we ought not to be taught. We must ask ourselves now, what are we teaching our young men and women? The Koreans are doing it, the Chinese are doing it, the Indians are doing it. The time is now for we Africans to do it. The time is now for Africans also to begin to patent some of the things that we have. How is it that the clothes which are Africans are patented by the Chinese? If we are not very careful, even these dances which are Bunyoro dances will be patented by Chinese. So that when you want to dance the Bunyoro Kitara dance, you've got to seek authority from Beijing. The time is now for us to begin to understand that intellectual property goes beyond culture and that it must be given its recognition. So my fellow countrymen and my fellow Africans, the question that we are here to ask this afternoon is this: if Africa desires to grow sustainably, how can we, leveraging on the spirit of Omukama Kabalega, attain it? Who was this Omukama Kabalega? Who was he? He was a personification of courage. And today, I'm asking you that we must embrace courage. Cowards die many times. And I'm urging you this afternoon, if we are going to allow culture to dominate our thinking in the realization that culture is not static, I'm asking you to embrace and to remember Omukama Kabalega because he was courageous. Today, I'm asking you to remember the memory and to give pride of praise to the memory of Omukama Kabalega because when it was necessary, he was a diplomat. I am asking you that because it is necessary to be diplomatic, we must embrace the spirit of diplomacy, because it is only by embracing the spirit of diplomacy that you are going to ensure that you get what you deserve. Today, as we remember Omukama Kabalega, I want you to remember that he was an example for others. Those who are students of history will remember that in as much as he learned from the Toro learned from him, and the Buganda learned from him, I want you to remember that that is necessary. I want you to remember that Omukama Kabalega was also compassionate, even when he used violence and force at certain times. In other words, there comes a time when instead of turning the other cheek, you must use the other fist. I'm now telling you that we as Africans must ask ourselves, when is it the right time to turn the other cheek, and when is it the right time to use the other fist? And I'm saying that you can do so by ensuring that you follow another quality of Omukama Kabalega. He was resilient. Many of you would have died in Seychelles. He stayed there for 23 years in an environment that was hostile, but he said, I'm not going to die in a foreign land. Although he died here in what is territorial Uganda, he was on his way home. I am reminding us that we must never forget our homes, because if you forget your home, you are a slave. I have no doubt in my mind that if Africa is to grow, Africa must embrace culture. If Africa is to realize our potential, we Africans must embrace culture. And I'm asking Africans as we go forward, we must be warriors for culture. We must be warriors for that which is true. So those of you who are Bagan, those of you who are Basoga, be proud Sogas. Those of you who are Zulus, be proud Zulus. Those of you who are Luos, be proud Luos. Those of you who are Lango, be proud Langos. And those of you who are Bunyoro, because we are in your midst, be proud Bunyoro, because it is only in that way that combined together we shall produce an African spirit. And in the spirit of Africanness, I can tell you, it is not going to be easy. There are going to be many roadblocks. We will rise and fall. We will rise and fall. We will rise and fall. But ultimately, we will stand, and history will remember us as those who rise and rise and rise. God bless.
Yeah, it's okay for you to continue clapping and giving the standing ovation and saying all the wows and giving us the deep sighs and wow. Did I need to even speak after Professor? I think he should have been the last person to speak, before we can get to have anything else. He should have been the last person to speak for us to stand up and just leave afterwards without any other response. But ladies and gentlemen, we have been challenged through a professor's speech. There's a lot of challenge that we have met. Honorable Cecilia Ogwal, thank you so much for sparing time to be with us, and welcome. Honorable Nyakato Asinasi from Hoima, welcome and thank you so much for as well sparing time to be with us. And right seated next to Honorable Nyakato is Ms. Hajara Nalwega, the Principal Culture Officer in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, who is also representing our Minister for Culture. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming through. And once again, I want to welcome Owechitiwa Dr. Anthony Wamala, who is representing the Premier of Buganda, Inaugural Kabalega wa Buganda. Thank you so much. And to every Munyoro who is here, because today we are celebrating 100 years of Kabalega, the challenge is upon us. And not only Banyoro, like Professor did say, to every one of us, from the culture that you come from, how much do you represent? And how much do you stand tall to support and say, I am a Muganda, I am a Musoga, I am a Langi, I am a Mtoro, I am a Mnyoro, I am whichever tribe and culture that you come from, and you stand tall to represent that, because modernity will not take away your pride and your history. That is a challenge to all of us. That is a question that we all need to be responding to. And I as well cannot wait to be able to listen to our panel, a great panel that is going to be presenting to us in just a bit. And like Professor did say, on this day, we exercise the spirit of mental slavery. How many are able and ready to exercise that spirit? There are some people who are not ready to exercise the spirit. How many are able and ready to exercise the spirit of mental slavery that we have had? That when they ask you, what is your name? My name is Mildred. Yeah, that is how you introduce yourself. Your name is Mildred, period, because you think having the English name is the most important thing or identity to yourself. You can't say my name is Tuhaise, and you do not want to be recognized as that because you think it's backward, because you think Mildred is the in thing, because you think having the English name is exactly what can be able to define you. I think we have a challenge ahead of us. And as we get into the panel discussion, and in just a bit, I will definitely be introducing to you our panelists. This is the time to remember our heritage, to remember where we come from, and to remember everything that Professor has said that is true, that culture plays a vital role and is at the center of every discussion that we're having. How many of us remember COVID-19? Yeah, if you don't remember COVID-19, you have a problem. Probably we need to take you to a mental health facility. All of us at some point in time took a bit of concoction of every shrub, of every leaf that you know around your homestead. How many did that? And you managed to stay alive, right? You didn't take the modern medicine, and anyway, modern medicine draws from traditional medicine. It's the herbs that are turned into what you take in the hospitals. We can bet on that until until we come to the night, but that is the reality. So culture, tradition is at the center of everything that we get to speak about. So just to chill us up a little bit before we get into our panel discussion, I am going to invite the cultural troupe to give us just one strong item that will remind us of the great Omukama Kabalega that we are talking about today, and reminding us about our heritage, reminding us about our roots and where we come from. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the cultural troupe. Thank you very much to the cultural troupe for giving us that beautiful one. A round of applause for them. And I'll just request each and every one of us for the next item that we're going to be having, feel free to stand up and dance because we're celebrating culture. Where we are today, the discussion is about celebrating culture. I also would like to recognize Director James Isagara Kisoro, who is the Executive Director of Kabalega Foundation, and for ensuring that you organize such a prestigious event. Thank you so much for making time with us. Prince Kimera Ramadan is also in our midst. Prince Kimera, wherever you are, do you want to wave to us? Or he's right at the back. Prince Richard Karisa with us amidst as well. I will be letting you know. We do also have Mr. Ismail Kusemerera, the Executive Director of the Midwestern Anti-Corruption Coalition. Yes, we are talking about good governance and fighting corruption. Thank you so much for making time to be with us. We have Mr. Muhumuza Didas, who is representing the Executive Director of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Wherever you are, thank you so much for making it. We have our beautiful queens, Miss Kosing Estella, who is Miss Bunyoro 2022-23. Could you just wave to us? And yeah, the wave is always different and, you know, not like someone is shaking your hand. We also have Miss Barbara Nyangoma, who is Miss Bunyoro, the current reigning queen. All right, thank you so much. Such a beautiful smile. Miss Atulinde Justine, who is Miss Greta Kitara as well. Thank you so much for making time, the beautiful queens, and I hope that you are doing much in your reign to ensure that you promote culture. So ladies and gentlemen, the stage was set by Professor Lumumba, and he challenged us to so many things. And I want us to take on this discussion much further. And in no particular order, we'll introduce our panel that is going to also be dissecting a number of these issues, the development that Professor talked about. That is not just about the skyscrapers and the gross domestic product per capita and all those, you know, technical jargons that we always hear read at every financial year release. And we think that is development when we talk about GDP growing by this particular percentage, but is it trickling down to the persons, the humanity that Professor did talk about? So allow me invite, in no particular order, our panelists, and I will start with Mr. Bakaye B. Lubega, who is the Assistant Commissioner Culture in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. And of course, he is going to be represented by Ms. Hajarana Lubega, who is the Principal Culture Officer in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Let's give her a round of applause as she comes up. I have another true son of Kabalega who never minces his words. He will talk straight for as long as that is the point that needs to be made. I am talking about none other than Professor Julius Kiza, who is a professor of political science at Makerere University and a great-grandson of Omukama Kabalega. Please use the other side because we need to see you as you come up. I know you are fit, you can be able to stretch out, but please make use of that particular one. And once again, allow me invite Mrs. Barbara Babwetera, who is the Executive Director of the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda. Let's give a round of applause to Mrs. Barbara Babwetera, to join us. All right, I know that we are well gender balanced in this because I know so many panels never come through to be as much gender balanced as possible. Okay, allow me invite Dr. Paul Chalimpa. Dr. Paul Chalimpa is a development and leadership expert and is also the Deputy Director General, Uganda Investment Authority. A round of applause for Dr. Chalimpa as he comes through. Allow me as well invite Mrs. Agnes Kabajuni. Agnes Kabajuni is the Executive Director of the Center for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights in Africa. Agnes, you are welcome. Let's give them some warmth as they come through. We were talking about courageousness. We have our Ektinisa Isaac Kalembe, who is the author of The Life and Legacy of Omukama Cwa II Kabalega. And if you haven't read this book, please make sure that you can be able to get your copy outside as you step out. Let's welcome our Ektinisa Isaac Kalembe as he does come through. And of course, I will be delighted to keep Ektinisa Byakutaga right there, because probably I will have some tight questions for you as well, and I will have Professor PLO as well stay right in the center where he is seated. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have an interactive panel discussion. I know that we have some microphones just right next to us, and at a later stage we will be engaging the audience. So as we listen carefully, I know we're going to be intrigued by some conversations and discussions coming through, and we may have a question or two, or we may have some supplements here and there on the conversation that we are having this afternoon. But allow me to start with Professor Kiza. You have a microphone that is right next to you. Would you like to unpack this conversation once again? I know that Prof has done it very, very well. You come from the academia, and Professor has challenged us on the role of culture in the academia. We are taught about, how many have been to the Canadian prairies, by the way? Allow me just ask. How many have been to the Canadian prairies? Okay, we have just one among, okay, once again, how many have been to the Canadian prairies? Apart from just one person I have here. Okay, what more did we learn in geography that Tennessee Valley Authority? How many have been to the offices of the Tennessee Valley Authority? Okay. We now know how much challenge we have amidst us. But the reason why I'm asking that, because I am looking at the role of culture, the place of culture in our academia. Just like Professor did challenge us, you can clearly see many people here learned things that they do not even know about, but they had to cram to be able to pass, because that is a standard that has also been set by another person, not ourselves as Africans. Professor. Yes, Professor Julius Kiza. And that is why Professor Piolo has decided to turn to look at you and listen to what your answer is going to be.
Mheshimiwa Professor Lumumba, tunashukuru sana mazungumzo zako. The Right Honorable Prime Minister, I was not even briefed on what protocol to follow in this meeting. I do not know. I know our mama from northern Uganda, Cecilia Ogwal, Honorable. Some of our great cultural sites for Bunyoro Kitara are in Doholo. And I have been there personally. So those are our people. Thank you very much, the panelists. Thank you, the organizers, ladies and gentlemen. It is always difficult for me to make comments after Professor P.K. Lumumba has given his remarks. I remember when I last chaired a panel discussion, it was at Makerere University, and Professor P.K. in a very persuasive tone was arguing that integration of East Africa should go slow. Go slow. Why are you hurrying? You don't meet a beautiful woman today and say, I love you, I have been dreaming about you, I want to marry you right now. You go slow, you date, go slow, put in your application, refine it, and then eventually propose. I argued at that platform that successful marriages do not happen when you have known the other party 100%. If you know 20%, that's enough. Move on. The rest you sort out later. And I'm here to argue, to remind Professor, that on that day we disagreed. I was arguing that if you really want African integration, don't go slow. You have to do it rapidly. The story of German unification, the story of unification of Italy under Mussolini, the story of America's unification. If you go slow, you're breeding the culture of what we are seeing in East Africa. we have moved from the push for a farm federation to a confederation. One is neat integration, the other is just meeting for coffee and tea and honey, and then you go back home to your own territorial spaces. So at least I can see that the evidence historically sometimes is on my side, although I don't have the oratory of Professor Pike Lumumba. Now today, we are here again addressing the subject of culture. Fortunately, we begin by agreeing on many, many things that have been raised. And one of those which touched me clearly was, if outsiders tell us that our cultures are backward, they're primitive, why are they stealing our cultures? I have been to Europe, and I have seen our own products, artifacts, including the surgeon's knife, which was used in Bunyoro in the year 1879 to carry out that iconic cesarean section. Now, this cesarean section in Bunyoro is critical for several reasons, but one of the outstanding ones is, by the way, Caesar did not begin with Bunyoro as an academic. I'm under obligation to correct that Caesar was named after Julius Caesar, who lived around 46 years before the current era. So it happens before Bunyoro Kitara's time. So, but the point is that at the time we are discussing, 1879, Caesarean sections in the Roman Empire would kill the mother and save the child. Caesarean sections in Europe, advanced Europe, would kill the mother and save the child. In Bunyoro, it is significant because we are able to save the mother and the child. And that is the achievement of Bunyoro Kitara. Very significant because it happens at a time when Europe was saying, look, Caesarean section is not worth our effort. Don't even bother. That the surgeon's knife of Bunyoro was stolen. Sir, we must fight to reclaim what's ours. And the surgeon's knife, that surgery is the symbol of the holistic nature of innovation in Bunyoro Kitara and of culture. Because at the beginning of the ritual, there were incarnations, which is speaking to the divine. The divine takeover. At the beginning of the ritual, our surgeon used wine which had brewed for over 8 days. When you brew first-class wine, sir, you have forgotten, you actually get high-quality wine, full of alcohol. We learned during COVID that alcohol can be medicinal, even for Pentecostals, even for Muslims. We were all using it. The Bunyoro knew before you and I. The Bunyoro sanitized their hands using locally brewed tonto, the local brew, banana wine, but brewed specifically from first-class wine. And so we see the integration of religion, the integration of culture, the integration of iron and metallurgy, because you're using a surgeon's knife, the integration of ritual practice, and you are seeing a very successful surgical operation. This leads me to the summary of my initial submission, namely that culture, as Professor Pike has pointed out, is multidimensional. He has raised, but I just want to emphasize that when we talk culture, we land into the space of modernization theory. In modernization theory, the assumption is that if you are not Western, you are backward. That to be modern, you must be Western. That poor countries are poor because they are poor. And your poverty is defined in terms of holding onto culture, which is seen as a tool of backwardness. Your backwardness is defined in terms of a culture which deals with cutting the face or mutating the body, as we see among the Pokot girls in Karamoja. So culture was narrowly defined. I'm inviting us to appreciate, and I'm sure Professor Pike will agree with me, that there is a dimension of culture. And this is the view that culture is a social institution. Culture refers to norms, to values, to attitudes that shape human behavior, that shape the idea that you can have cohesion in society. That culture has this positive dimension which is underemphasized by modernization theory. that actually even today as we talk culture, we are talking of a digital culture, the culture of the urban industrial society, the culture of a knowledge society. But make no mistakes, culture is a mixed blessing. We cannot idolize everything in the name of culture, because there are certain cultural practices that even Kabalega would not agree with today. I'll give 3 examples. First, there was a cultural perception that the girl child is inferior to the boy child. Therefore, if you're taking children to school and there are hardships, and there are usually hardships, take the boy child, leave the girl child behind. I'm happy to note that in Uganda and in Bunyoro Kitara, that culture is changing. Number 2, culturally, we believed in Ubuntu. This Ubuntu has become an African philosophy, which we are exporting to the world. The idea that whatever you do must be tamed by the perception of what John Mbiti said, I am because we are. And since we are, therefore I am. In other words, individualism, the idea that you pursue your selfish agendas without thoughts of what it does to other people in society. That idea is not for Banyoro, that idea is not African. And so we need to learn from that aspect. But we need to appreciate that we are having a new digital culture where the young generation is saying, Jagala kagwiraho, nkwenda kagwiraho, ngukufuna muki, today. So the perception of many of our young people, and we have a big job, we have to teach our children, the youth, the young generation, that culture they are acquiring is counterproductive. So in short, we need to appreciate that in culture, we have a mixed blessing. Some elements are great and positive, and we must pick them and grow them and use them to promote development. But we also do have negative elements, which we must edit out of our culture as we promote structural, social, and economic transformation. I'm sorry if I've taken too many minutes.
Don't worry. We will definitely be getting back to you. Thank you very much, Professor Kiza. I want to move to Mrs. Barbara Wawetera. We're talking about the role of culture in the promotion. Hajat, if you could just help me. Okay, she has a microphone next to her. The role of culture in the promotion of development. And when we're talking about development, health is key. Like they always say, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. And we know that there is great potential in what many would term as traditional medicine. As I clearly earlier on did ask, during COVID-19, each one of us ran to their backyard to try and find out, do I have a herb? Do I have a spice? Do I have something that I can be able to use? And also there's been a whole lot of discussion, even in Uganda's context, between the Ministry of Health and, the traditional institutions on how to incorporate traditional medicine in modern day, medicine, and how the two can be able to work alongside each other. I want you to delve deeper into that conversation on culture, our traditional medicine, and relating it to the modern day medicine that we do have.
Thank you very much, Mildred. Once again, I'm by the name of Barbara Babwetera Mutambi Aboli, and I also belong to the Bakoransi clan of Bunyoro, and we are the ones that have the totem of the rhinoceros. And we played a great role in the palace as a clan. I'm glad to have Professor Lumumba, that I've always admired and listened to his speeches. My Prime Minister, Byakutaga, we are always and often together talking about development of our cultural institution and where are we at as the Banyoro to contribute to that development. You've talked about something that is very critical that I think also Amoti Kiza has alluded to. The role of traditional medicine, or sometimes called alternative medicine. I don't know alternative to what. That would be a question for us to think through. And alternative to who? Those are some questions I want us to also think about as we are trying to delve deeper into the role of traditional medicine in modern day development. I must say that one thing that made me so proud and happy about during the COVID period was for us to realize the biggest resource that we have for many years abandoned and thought about negatively simply because we are told that traditional medicine or herbal medicine is wrong, is evil, is satanic, while what you get from the European pharmaceuticals is what is holier, is what is more effective, etc. I do not deny the fact that there is a lot of room for us to improve in terms of research, in terms of packaging, in terms of monitoring and looking at the side effects. But what is it that it actually does for us? As I looked around and as I listened through to the media during the COVID period, when the Western world had said no vaccines for Africa, what we have is a reserve for our own people. Who did we have to turn to? I must say that every family horde went back to its roots. We went back to traditional medicine. We started steaming ourselves. Social media played a big role in terms of information sharing. What we had for so long abandoned and called satanic, even the pastors, I want to assure you, were steaming, despite the fact that we used to say, or they used to say, it is satanic. There was a research that I was trying to look at, where some people had endeavored to do a research on two biggest COVID-19 centers where patients were. That was Nambole and also Mulago National Referral Hospital. One thing that shocked me was that this particular research was terminated prematurely. But what was the reason? They found that over 90% of the patients attested to having used herbal medicine before admission, during admission, and at the time of discharge. But within 2 weeks, the research was terminated simply because most of the patients were discharged. What do we owe that to? When the COVID vaccination was very little, and being vaccinated when you already have the disease, I don't think that was the remedy, but rather the traditional or herbal medicines that they used before admission and during admission. And therefore, my call to every Ugandan, let us not perceive our traditional medicine as satanic, as negative, in preference for only Western medicine, but rather look at what role it plays. It is also said that even over 80% of our people today are still using traditional medicine. Why? Because of the number of challenges that relate to access to health care. If anyone can give me the ratio of one medical doctor in Uganda to the number of patients, how many? 40,000, something like that, per one doctor, as compared to the European countries where it could be one doctor to around 2,000 people. Health centers are difficult to access. So majority of our people are already using traditional medicine, and when we try to look at the definition of development, it is the ability to solve your challenges for the good or the better. So if you can do that at the household level, at wherever you are, isn't that development? Let us think twice. Let us not belittle who we are. And I have also learned that since the COVID period, the number of applications coming into the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology to study our traditional medicine has increased by 200%. What does that tell you? Continue calling our own satanic, fail to invest in it, we are not realizing the economic power that is being built the other side. They take whatever it is, develop it, patent it, bring it back, or sometimes with side effects, because what they will do is to study what chemical component is active, extract it, manufacture it in industries, package it, bring it back, and then we adore what is from out and belittle what is ours. The role of traditional herbal medicine cannot be underrated, and I must say that even in China, I lived there for at least 3 years. The moment you fall sick and go to their hospitals, after diagnosis, they will ask you, would you like traditional medicine or you want Western? Very few of the Chinese actually go to the window, certain part, simply because they've been made aware of what the good resource they do have and promoting their own. Majority will go to the window of traditional medicine. I think I've tried to say a little bit about the combination and how our traditional herbal medicine is key, and it plays a very big role in the development of our nation. We drop it at our own risk.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Barbara. A round of applause for her. I want to move on to Mrs. Agnes. And this loops into what Professor said about mindset change and looking at socio-economic transformation at the household level. Prof, currently the government is running a program, the Parish Development Model, looking into the socio-economic transformation of the country, but starting at the household level. And we always have this whole thinking of, we say government etuyambe, let the government help us, because every other time we keep calling upon the government to help us, forgetting that there is something that we can be able to do at the household level. And that is what I'd like Mrs. Agnes to loop into on looking at culture drawing into economic development at our household level. We are forgetting what we used to do back in the day to sustain ourselves at the household level, and which would later on be able to trickle down to the greater percentage at the higher level.
Thank you so much. Agnes Kawajuna, as they said, and Mwana Mtoro, and Mukazi Mavitokati, Nindugatoro Kingdom. Mpako yange ni nyawadieri. First of all, social economic development starts from a house, and that is the home. How do we link this one to culture? Professor has said that culture is beliefs, our values, our practices, and norms that are set at household level. So if we are going to fight the diseases that have been identified for a long time, which is poverty, hunger, and illiteracy, we begin from the house. At the household is where we identify the mindset, the value and the ethical around work is inculcated to a child from the smallest young age by participating in household chores. So we are not moving into the macro sustainable development agenda without us coming down and see how much are we inculcating into our children. If we are not looking at the issue of valuing, let's say, our production at the household level, we start by making a mat, which mat actually informs designs that are commercialized, that result into broader designs into buildings, into commercialized products that again are sold to us. But we go back to the household. How much can we learn from our traditional crafts, for example? How much can we learn from our traditional production and tools of production that are made within the community? And the power of having production understood into our culture is that it is broadly acceptable by different sectors of public, including women, the youth, and the children. I will give an example of one of the social economic development around music and entertainment. Globally, the bigger percentage of success and development around music and entertainment is influenced by culture. But where do we start? We start by teaching our children, teaching our families, and teaching our communities, because our cultures are full, are musical in nature, are entertainment in nature. And this is what transformed into influencing the music that we promote at the national level, that is promoted at the international level. How much can we make if this goes back to how we orient our sustainable development agenda to influence those small household level that can be grown and that can be developed? If I look at the level of agriculture and look at what we can do in terms of development, food production begins at household level. But food production is cultural. The way it is presented, the way it is grown, the way it is stored. There is a lot that we learn from our cultural that has been done for centuries of years that informs that now that we come in and discuss as sustainable or sustainable development. But what have we done with our natural indigenous seeds? Just like Professor Lumumba has said, we kick them out, we bring modern seeds. I don't know, we are discussing GMOs, and therefore we are tackling those other indigenous seeds that can withstand climate changes, that can withstand the different weather patterns, that is appropriate in terms of nutrition and value, and we devalue it by thinking it is not modern because we want to produce for commercialization. So it goes back. If we are going, for example, to deal with transform our societies in terms of food security, we must go back and draw our steps back into how did we do it in our culture? The granaries at every household. How many do we have today? You will find houses empty. We are no longer focusing on what we did. The production chain itself, which ranges from the women, the children, the members of the household. I know people who promote gender equality, and I'm one of them. We will say women do a lot in labor. It wasn't so in culture. Men did clear fields, did participate in agriculture, and did deliver the food, the production of food in terms of storage, and I mean creating the storage facilities and tools. What changed? So we go back and look at what we did in our culture. There is a lot to learn. That now when we come to talk about food security, about sustainable development goal number 1, fighting poverty, fighting hunger goal number 2, we come back and look at what did we lose at the local level, at the social fabric, societies working together. There is something that we lose because culture in itself was a school. And culture as a school trained its members on how to do certain things. For example, there are different trades. There is carving, there is crafts, there is ironsmith, and there are others that were done at cultural level, but in a very organized manner, in the form of specialization. A carpenter, we are born carpenter and we are attached to spiritual. What does that mean? It meant they had the passion, they had the responsibility to transfer information from one generation to another. And to me, that was social transformation, that was sustainable. That is development. Unless we go back to track those roots and define them the way culture had taught us, then we are missing a point.
Okay.
Because mindset is when we throw out what we knew and try to adopt the what is new, and we cannot do it perfectly.
Yeah.
So I think for now, I will leave it at that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Agnes. Takes us back to what we used to do that sustained us as families and communities that we no longer do, and we have to state that statement, government here to Yambe. Well, that is where we start having theft and people having to do all sorts of things because they need food and there is no food, like Mrs. Agnes has asked at the end of the day. Let me come to Dr. Chalimpa. Professor Lumumba stressed the role of culture, the role of cultural leaders and institutions at the heart of socio-economic transformation. In your own view, have we done that? If not, how better can we be able to do it? How do we put culture, the institutions, the leaders at the center stage? And I want to take it back a bit to COVID-19, when the government was urging people to go for vaccination, and everyone seemed aloof. Up until a time, for example, when the Kabaka of Uganda, Sabasa, just said, we all need to go for vaccination. You remember how many thousands of people turned up to be vaccinated there. Have we put culture at the center stage if we're talking about the socio-economic transformation?
Thank you very much. Our chief guest, I stand on the previous protocols in the interest of time. Once again, my name is Dr. Paul Chalimpa Amoti, and from the discussion, if you try to get the center, the axis for all these challenges which Professor has mentioned, and what we see as the progress made, we are actually talking about the role of our leaders or leadership. Why in Africa, like other continents and other countries, the leaders have the platform to influence what people believe in. They have the financial resources to allocate and to determine, therefore, what can be done and what cannot be done. Our leaders have the legitimacy of the people. Like traditionally Kabalega, who was both a traditional leader and a political leader, the leadership has even coercive powers to coerce you to accept what even may not be true or correct. They have the power to misinform. Now, what has the Western world done? They have gotten hold of the influential leaders and placed them and financed their positioning in influential positions. In African history, in terms of socio-economic transformation, political history of Africa, when they talk about assassination of transformational leaders in Africa, you will note this was done with the help of the fellow African. You will.
Sorry about that.
I hope there is no white man at the back. If you review the history of the assassination of transformational African leaders who championed independence and who are ready to transform Africa post-independence, you will appreciate that most of them were eliminated with the support and collaboration of fellow Africans. When you kill the seed, you kill the species, the whole species. However, there are a few seeds which had been planted. Today, they are the Lumumbas we see today here. Now, what challenges do we have or lie ahead of us? The first one is that we, the people who believe in championing this change or transformation, must be willing to volunteer. The white man, what he has done four things. The first one, commercialization of every aspect of our life, to the extent that we work and produce for the white man. We don't add value to our resources. We produce, they dictate what we produce. One of the panelists has indicated that today our crops, traditional crops, such as maize, has been replaced with the new breeds, to the extent that if you plant the modern seeds, you cannot pick a seed from the same plant, from the same maize, to use it for the next season. You must go and buy from another person. That's the dependency. African leaders must work towards eliminating dependency economically. The second one is killing of African traditional values, which are hinged around Ubuntu. Is a philosophy that is centered around collective responsibility, where we say that if there is insecurity somewhere, there is insecurity everywhere. If my neighbor is insecure, I'm also insecure. Today it is my neighbor, tomorrow it is me. Now, they have divided us, and each one of us is working for our own self. We are not working as a team. We don't care about our neighbors. That divides us. When you talk about religion, which Professor has mentioned, you find people are believing in Jesus Christ, but they say, me I'm a Catholic, me I'm a Protestant. But all of them are talking about the same God, the same Jesus. As Africans, what can't we see far that this is keeping us in division as the Europeans move ahead? Can we control this? So I'm thinking, or in my view, that leadership has to step up, and cultural leaders have to be a preserve and models for our cultural beliefs, our cultural norms. They have to champion and mobilize people to be economically productive, to avoid overdependency on the Europeans, and have to mobilize people so that you are united towards a common goal, and all the resources they control, they should use them to champion humanity, unity, and self-dependency. And all this is a job of African leaders. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The role, the spirit of Ubuntu, which is very key. Madam Hajara, I'm coming to you. especially from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, which I call the Ministry of Everyone, because somehow, somewhere, you're either young or old, you're either working or not working, so you're blessed in that ministry. Where is the role, where is the place of culture? I know we have a Ministry of Culture, which is placed under, but where is its role? Because like Professor said, there needs to be an enhanced role of these cultural leaders, the cultural institutions, or are we only keeping them for the recognition and for scoring the political points that come out of saying, yes, we have the cultural institutions restored and we have them running in the country?
Thank you very much to Haise, is our chief guest. Our Honorable Prime Minister, my colleague discussants, members of Parliament in the room, ladies and gentlemen, once again, my name is Hajat Hajara Nalubega. Yes, ndi mchala Muganda, nenga mama ange mchala Mtoro, so I have both. Mtoro, msitakati, mpako yange ni Waboli.